I mean, one of the big questions that I often see in the Indies group or in the Indie Pro group on Facebook, or even in consultations that I've had in the past or IndieX consults is like, here's what I've done, here's what I'm doing, here's where I want to be. How do I get there?
Right.
And that's something that often a training, watching it by yourself doesn't necessarily part the veil, so to speak. So having that
I think part of that too, you're so busy ingesting when you're in the trainings, which is really important, right? You want comprehension, but then implementation of that understanding, that's not inbound. That has to be outbound. And so it's actually a total change in the function, right? And so maybe, you're naturally adept at doing that. But if you're not, it can be a sticking point. It can keep you from progressing,
Yeah.
And that's the biggest reason why the whole founder program was created, was so that we could get indies unstuck.
You are now listening to the Creative Juice podcast, brought to you by Indiepreneur.io.
What's up, Indies? Welcome back to Creative Juice. My name is Corrin Campbell. With me, as always, is my lovely, awesome, good-looking, well-put-together co-host, Jack.
Oh,
how are you doing,
Jack?
Gosh,
I don't do well with compliments. That's how I'm doing. Doing great.
Don't worry, it's just forward-facing.
It's all the hate. It's all the hate behind the Slack channel.
Yeah, exactly. Watch out for me. Just savage. I'm savage in Slack. No, well, I'm glad you're doing well. I really had a fun time reviewing Jesse's interviews with these founders. I hope that you guys enjoyed that. I mean, it's really cool to see indies bring themselves from one place to another. And I feel like we kind of, Jesse selected some great examples of, people at different levels. So whether they were already pretty advanced and doing more advanced things, or whether they were still feeling stuff out, we even had AJ Crew, who, if you go back to the early days of the Creative Juice podcast, you'll see that there's an episode with him and Circa way back. So, and he was like one of the original founders when the founder was an entirely different program. So that was super fun. And I just, can't shut up about Founder, but we have a really great, cool announcement, which you're going to have to wait until the end of the episode. Ooh. So you just got clickbaited. Yeah, exactly. So, and Jack, I know that sometimes when we get IndieX applications and they're not a great fit for IndieX, a lot of times you refer them to Founder, right?
Often. Very often, actually. Yeah.
And can you kind of explain why that is?
Yeah, absolutely. So just to give you guys all some background, when we have artists who apply to work with us at the IndieX agency, we're always really careful about just kind of doing some vetting and due diligence on the artists that are applying, because we want to make sure that people who might be coming to the agency or who are interested in agency or services are a good fit for, one, what we do, and two, what we can do for them. Because agency services from a financial perspective really aren't the best fit for a lot of artists, especially folks who are just getting started. Maybe they don't have a lot of revenue being generated. Maybe they really don't have the audiences that we have levers to pull where we can actually, make maximum impact for them, that makes sense for them from a financial perspective. So when we look over IndieX applications, we look for a lot of different criteria, things that, that we can say, okay, like based on where this person is at, we can either help them or, they need to put in some more work on their own. But what's really cool is where we're able to look and see like, wow, this person's really got like a solid baseline. Their music is dope. And, they need some extra help. Maybe they just need some coaching. It looks like their team is set up, if they've got a team, to really help them succeed. And that might be why they're applying for IndieX. But, they're still kind of in the space where it might not be a good fit, might not be the recommendation that we would make. And we have to be, we have to be picky, so to speak, about who comes on board at agency just because it's the right thing to do. But with that said, a lot of times IndieFounder makes sense as a great fit for them. So we end up referring a lot of people to IndieFounder and letting them explore that as an opportunity to grow.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. And, every time somebody puts in, if they get a founder seat or if they put in an IndieX application, or, anytime that we have something that really requires more follow-up than just like, oh, someone got Indie Pro, full stack merch applications, all of that goes into a Slack channel that's called, it doesn't matter what it's called. It goes into our Slack channels. And a lot of times I see just a very clear misunderstanding of what IndieX does. And we're not going to spend this whole episode talking about IndieX, but I feel a little like, parental preachy at the moment, because I really want everyone to understand that IndieX is not intended to like skip a step for you, right? It's to propel you past the steps you've already accomplished.
Absolutely.
So if you put in an application for IndieX and you're like, oh, we just don't have time to do the trainings, or we don't have time to build up a customer base, IndieX is not for you. IndieX is a good, revenue lift if you already have customers and are generating sales and you need to figure out how to maximize those and increase them. If you're looking to do more advanced things, then you can do on your own. That's really what IndieX is for. And I just want to make sure that indies understand that. And we're definitely not just going to take your money. There's a lot of marketing, social media, PR companies out there that are just, savages to indies, and will just be like, yeah, we'll take your money, and whether or not you get anything from it is your problem. At IndieX, it's important, Jack wants to maintain a 100% success rate, that everybody who is in IndieX, and whether they stay with us forever, which we have a couple of clients that have just been with us for a couple of years now, or whether they only come on for 3 to 4 months, there's a very clear objective. And, I think the success rate is important to Jack, So Jack, I just wanted to kind of have that soapbox moment and also give you an opportunity to say anything you would like about it, because I think it really, gets into what our topic is for this episode. So are there any other little tidbits you'd like to share?
Yeah, for sure. I think when it comes to, looking at, hiring any kind of service provider, it's important to talk about, or consider, what am I going to get out of this? What is this going to look like for me? And, for a lot of artists, we do, from time to time bring on, artists who are kind of in the initial stages, and it's a very limited time to time where that happens, who are in the initial stages of building their fan base. But, there are some exceptions to be made there. But there's always the driving goal of knowing that this is going to be primarily audience building, and the result that you're, from an agency perspective that we can drive for you is not necessarily going to be monetary, but that doesn't mean that it's without value. Now, that said, a lot of the work that we do is always trying to be result driven in one way or another. So when I have, what are called IndieX consults, they're not really supposed to be sales calls, which is counterintuitive to what a lot of agencies do. They get an artist or a prospective client on the phone, and basically they try to hard sell them and tell them about all the great things that they can do, and probably overpromise, and oftentimes can end up under delivering. And it's a really unfortunate thing. And that's a really important piece of the ethos that we have at Indepreneur here is we come from a very do no harm kind of place. So many of the consult calls that I have about IndieX with artists who are interested in them, I end up referring them to either something in the training and saying hey, these are the things that I think you should tackle before you even consider hiring an agency, or pointing them to IndieFounder because it's just the right recommendation to make.
Right.
That's a lot of those conversations, and it's really good. I mean, it's a good thing to be able to do. It's good to be able to give those sort of recommendations, and I hope that for anybody listening who may have had a consult with me where I made those kind of recommendations, that it made sense and it moved the needle in the right direction and didn't end up, with them spending more money than they really needed to start moving them in the right direction. So
yeah, we're just like we don't for Indie Pro or for any of our courses, we're not just going to take your money, you know? And I'm really happy that Jack stands by that and holds the standard true in the IndieX process just as much, because it's not an easy button. It's not a do it for you kind of situation unless, you know, there's all of these things in place. So, and we take very few grassroots, right? Like, do you have a certain number of slots, Jack, for grassroots artists, or like what is the criterion usually for someone who doesn't already have like a lot of customers and a lot of revenue happening?
Really, you know, it's pretty, even that is pretty consultative. I don't really have like a specific number of slots that I say like these are allocated for grassroots artists and that's it. But it's pretty case by case, you know, like the content has to be amazing. There has to be, the music obviously has to be really good. That's a prerequisite across the board. But the content really has to be in place. There has to be, you know, somewhat of a plan in place before they even think about engaging. At the grassroots stage, you know, if someone were to come to me with very little content and not really much of a workup, then, you know, I'm going to say like, well, you know, we're not miracle workers here. You know, I think you said it well. Like, it's not an easy, agency services are certainly not an easy button. We're not miracle workers, and there's only so much that can be done. Especially when it comes to initial asset building, where it's like, you know, building the stages, the campaigns in your buddy system that are going to do work for you, and then letting them do the work. That's really important at the early stages of audience building. So,
right. So like you do the work, then these tools you set up do the work, and then IndieX does the work.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, totally. So, and you know, it kind of goes along with the fact like, we, you know, rebel against major labels because we're sick of money dictating, you know, success or failure of artists in the industry. And so in the same way, like, we're not going to let you pay us, you know, to try to skip a step, you know, because that's exactly what we think is wrong with the music industry. So I think it makes a lot of sense. And, you know, so the reason I wanted to get into that was because I believe that Founder and all of like the little splinters that we've come up with it have really brought indies to a point where they feel empowered and don't have to pay, you know, however much a month to like have people doing stuff for them.
Yeah.
At this point, they're really developing those skills. And I think that was well evidenced in the previous 2 episodes. So we have some cool developments happening in Founder, and we just wanted to talk about it.
Yeah, definitely.
So Jack, you were planning on putting me kind of in the hot seat this episode. Is that?
That is the plan. That is the plan. I have so many questions about IndieFounder for you. I think it was so good to hear from Jesse in the previous 2 episodes and from Indies, and really get a picture of things from them and how Founder has helped with where they're going in their careers and how, and you know, what Jesse's doing in IndieFounder to facilitate that. But now I want to hear from you. And I think everybody else does too. Obviously we've talked a lot about IndieFounder on the podcast, and it certainly comes up in plenty of our conversations on specific topics like permission. When we were doing the full arc on permission, certainly we got into Founder discussions there too. But I want to get a little bit deeper into things, especially with like the upcoming changes and developments. But I guess my first question here for you is just to kind of recap for listeners who might be checking in for the first time, or maybe wondering like, what the hell is Founder? What is IndieFounder? Like, give us
what the hell is Founder?
What the hell is Founder? Give us the deets here.
The extended elevator pitch, because trust me, I never talk for only 30 seconds. That just ain't a thing. But yeah, so IndieFounder, originally an Indiepreneur, which, I mean, we're talking way back in the day.
OG.
Okay, before Indie Pro. Yeah, OG Indiepreneur, which is kind of funny to say because obviously we're not even a 4-year-old company yet. But, original Founder was actually developed by Circa, and it was one-on-one coaching. So essentially it was a much more condensed version of IndieX, where essentially instead of hiring IndieX and its technicians to do things for you, you would basically be getting a consult once a week, and it was for, I think, 30 minutes. And, Circa or I, because eventually I was migrated into it as well, we would be like, all right, you finish these objectives. Here are the tech stack things you need to do. Here's the trainings you can reference, or here are the articles you can Google to get your FitFon on to get these done. And it was really more of an accountability. Like there was some insight, into pivots, especially when founders were running ads, like figuring out why certain ads may not be working, or if they really hit some kind of struggle point in the tech, we might pitch in real quick, kind of thing. That was, I think it was a really valuable version of the program, because it gave us a lot of insight into, just checking out how these things were working across various accounts, and gave us some more case studies to really look into, see if our strategies that we were recommending is, working across all of these platforms, if it's something that's actually executable by indies, and so that's really where Founder kind of originated. And then, Cirque and I became more busy, and Jack was completely inundated with IndieX. And it was a point where it's like, all right, this cannot scale. Like, we don't have time.
Will it scale or will it fail?
Right. We would have to take like 4 or 5, people at a time to really make it happen. And it just wasn't going to be possible. And also we don't really want to offer something that's like for 4 people. Like it's just kind of cruddy, because then a lot of indies want it and there's a wait list for 18 months. Like nobody wants to deal with that frustration, So we didn't want to frustrate indies, so we just kind of halted the program. So I think it was almost a year ago, I said to Cirque, I was like, look, I like the idea of Founder. I like the idea that we can, obviously through our Indie Pro section, or even, just regular indies can get consults, hourly consults, 55-minute consults with one of our brilliant technicians, and they can kind of help walk them through the process. But sometimes it's better to have someone, kind of coaching you over an arc. And I was like, well, so many things that we dealt with in Founder previously, it was very similar advice. We were saying like, okay, you need to build these things, you need to integrate these things, you need to connect, and there wasn't really as much technical difference between what these indies were doing. It was more their artistry and the creative angle that varied per artist. But it was like, okay, some indies just want something beyond the training. Like, okay, I understand the training, I grasp that. Now, how do I elevate my understanding or execution of it? So that's kind of where this first brainstorm came along. And I love interfacing with indies. I mean, there's something that still, it doesn't matter what happens with Indepreneur, I'm always going to want that FaceTime, here and there, because it keeps me in tune with what the community's thinking. And I know the struggles that indies are going through, especially as all the platforms change. And it just keeps me really in tune to what's going on in our community. So that's when I just started to do Founder. So I want to say it was in maybe October. No, I think the first session was like part of Black Friday, maybe. I don't remember. Sorry, guys. No, there was one beta session in the summer. I remember there was one beta session in the summer, and then we had, like one in the fall as well. So anyway, IndieFounder now is intended to, it's a, group coaching, and it isn't one-on-one in its format, but in the structure, it is intended to give everybody one-on-one time. It's not like you come to a Zoom call and everybody's around and you watch us lecture and then that's it,
Yeah.
It's definitely, everybody submits their stuff. The coach is really in tune. Either me or Jesse, we're, the main coaches. And we will basically assess where you are based on the information you're submitting through these various assignments, which, we hate calling them that, but it's really just the best word for them. But we have these little exercises that you do every week. And when you bring back to us where you are from that assignment, we can immediately pivot to, if you're a beginner indie, we can pivot to, all right, these are the things that you're going to need to set up. If you're an advanced indie, we can give you advice based on the advanced strategies that you may need to execute. And so that is, it's exciting. It's a fun pivoting, moment for us as the coaches. You also get a lot of benefit of seeing these other people, like being exposed to people who are more advanced than you or people who are more beginner. There's still a breadth of exposure that you're getting to other people's art and other people's tech, which makes you more flexible a thinker when you're marketing your own things, because it gives you all of these ideas. So that's really kind of the structure of Founder now. And, we had Founder Foundations as the first thing. And then we've kind of splintered off into, right now we have permission sessions and affirmation sessions, which, if you're familiar with the buddy system, you know what that is. But permission is all about email opt-ins and getting the tech of landing pages to work and coming up with interesting offers, all the things that Jack and I were talking about last month. And then affirmation is really for those who are like, okay, I have these people on a mailing list, but I can't manage to make enough sales to make sense. Or, they bought one thing, but now I can't get them to buy anything else. And so we help with merch development and offer strategizing and all kinds of things. And that's where we're really getting into the weeds on all of these, these indies and what they're doing and getting into individual stuff. And it's really exciting. It's super fun.
That is really exciting. I was just going to mention, like, throughout running Founder Foundations, from, towards the tail end of last year through 2020, you've mentioned that you started to notice specific trends and feedback from the founders about their needs, and that kind of translated into the creation of these splinter programs. So what does that entail? How does permission and affirmation splinters of Founder, how do they interplay with the Foundations program?
Yeah, so the Foundations isn't necessarily a prerequisite for permission and affirmation, right? Like it really is meant to be an elevation of kind of all the things that you want to get in place, either before you run your first set of campaigns, like maybe your fan finder and then your album launch, or if the other people that go through it are dealing with launching a new campaign, like maybe their last thing didn't do so great, or it's just a bigger zoom out on like pretty much everything that we cover in Indie Pro. We do tell students, like, whether they're new to Indiepreneur or whether they have been around for a while, is like, well, touch on those trainings, because it's not a walkthrough of the trainings. It's meant to elevate beyond that. So, because there are so many topics involved, it kind of required us to realize, as we were going through, we have 1 week that's about, email marketing, which includes your welcome series, any kind of education process and nurturing process, and also like ascension and offering for purchases and getting people to elevate to the next thing, and that's all in 1 week. And what we're teaching in 1 week is really how to use the tools, and there's some tech stuff involved in that, right? So we just found that was a lot. And people were like, okay, I did all that, but I can't get people to opt in, And that's where we realized that the creative insight would be more helpful in the email department.
Yeah.
So that's why we developed out the permission splinters, so that we could be like, all right, we're going to help you figure out your artistry. If you're uncomfortable or not sure what to offer people for an email address, we're going to help you figure it out within your brand, your artistry, your creative vein, your personality. How are we going to talk to people? How are we going to get them interested in this? And then how are we going to retain them within your mailing list? And, I think that's worked out really well. I have seen indies create really, really creative campaigns that have kept their fans engaged and is offering them a lot right off the bat. So it's not a stretch for someone to give you their email for it, because it's cool.
Yeah, that's so cool. And I feel like that's probably like a lot of the coaching that some people need, especially if they're getting into this, this digital marketing world for the first time. The overwhelm that comes with just learning how to use the marketing tech is one thing, but then all of a sudden trying to apply your creativity to that can be really challenging. Obviously, we've talked about that ad nauseum on episodes about permission. I'm specific.
It's still sometimes tough to ideate though, without someone basically we're trying to stick our finger inside someone's skull and poke.
Yeah.
All the fears that a lot of indies have about sounding salesy or, what else is there about me besides my music? And it's we'll help you figure it out,
right. Yeah.
And that is super fun because I'm oh, okay, I got this hip hop artist. All right, cool. What's your style? All right, fill out this personality questionnaire. All right, now how do you talk to people? And you just get to dive in on their stuff. And then there's a jazz artist. It's okay, what kind of cool thing, what's cool about you and what are your talking points and, how do you conduct yourself on a daily basis? What's cool about your brand? So we get to know people really quickly and we get to get into their music and their overall personalities and vibes. And it's just super fun. And I do think that when I see the results of people who have gone through permission, I'm just very encouraged by the amount of understanding they now have about how to market themselves in a way that doesn't feel foreign, that doesn't feel awkward or unnatural. It's now tailored to who they are and they don't have to feel weird about it anymore.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that totally makes sense. And it sounds like it's unlocking that last little piece that people need when they're learning, how to make permission, especially the mystical permission stage work for them.
Yeah.
Having that extra set of eyes and kind of that, almost an incubator. Seeing founders like an incubator with other artists kind of working together and collaborating is really, really cool. I'm curious for people who might be wondering, so how does a founder session look, day to day, week to week? What is the inner workings of the program look like?
So essentially, it depends on what splinter you're in, right? Our permission splinter is 4 weeks. And the affirmation splinter, for example, which is, again, our purchase-focused splinter, that one is 6 weeks. Founder Foundation is 8 weeks, right? So if you're in a session that is 6 weeks and above, there are 2 coaching calls. And that's because if you're in a 6-week session, it's intense. There's a lot of stuff to sort through in the exercises given for each week.
Yeah.
So that's why we provide 2 calls, is so people can have an opportunity to do the exercise and get some feedback on their first iteration. And then when they get that feedback, they go and do more in their exercise based on that feedback. And then for the second call, they can bring it and get even more insight into it. So it really allows people, I think, to dig deeper into facets that, if we only had 1 call per week, they might, if you don't get on the right path right away, and then we give you 7 days to go down that path and get lost, we'd rather stop you midway at the fork in the road and be well, go this way,
Yeah.
So I think that that's pretty typical. So there are 2 coaching calls that are roughly 90 minutes. It kind of depends on how many students are in the session. And these different sessions have anywhere from typically 10 to 12 seats. So it's not crowded, and everybody's getting some good time in there. But, there'll be a call once or twice a week. Everybody gets 1 exercise per week that's meant to dig into what currently exists, what needs to exist, and inspiration for what could exist. And that's essentially what we're doing every single week, is looking behind us, looking where we are right now, and looking ahead. And we try to make it as, the longevity of the knowledge, we try to make that as long as possible. We want people to take it away, take away some knowledge that they can use in the future.
That's awesome. I mean, that sounds so incredibly helpful. One of the big questions that I often see in the Indies group or in the Indie Pro group on Facebook, or even in consultations that I've had in the past, or IndieX consults, is here's what I've done. Here's what I'm doing. Here's where I want to be. How do I get there?
Right.
And that's something that often a training, watching it by yourself doesn't necessarily part the veil, so to speak. So having that
I think part of that too, you're so busy ingesting when you're in the trainings, which is really important, right? You want comprehension, but then implementation of that understanding, that's not inbound. That has to be outbound. And so it's actually a total change in the function, right? And so maybe, you're naturally adept at doing that. But if you're not, it can be a sticking point. It can keep you from progressing,
Yeah.
And that's the biggest reason why the whole founder program was created, was so that we could get indies unstuck.
Yeah. It's like breaking you out of the cycle of like stop and start.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Yep.
That's so good.
So we like to look at past momentum to current, what pace have you been running at, and then being like, okay, we can accelerate that, or we can, can you sustain it? Can you do more? Do you need to do less? Because some people are doing too many things. They're focusing on so many different, well, they're not focusing. They're just spreading themselves so thin that they're not getting any leverage in any one department. So this kind of helps them filter that out,
Break away from the shiny object syndrome.
Yeah, and I know, Jack, I'm sure you know that well, that shiny object syndrome. I'm sure it happens with IndieX clients as well, where it's like, look, we can do all the things, but let's make you really great at these things then add those.
I feel that if there were a swear word jar for the number of times that I probably say shiny object syndrome to you in a given week, you would be very, very rich.
I would love to be very, very rich. Let's do it right now.
It's totally true though. I mean, across the board, like even into work that we do with our artists at IndieX, shiny object syndrome is something that can really distract you and stop you from having momentum, because you feel like you're doing a lot of things and you're, on top of the hot trends, but in reality, you're just distracting yourself from what you actually have to do. Not to get on a high horse about it, but Digital Marketer had a really funny meme. Probably they posted back in like March, and it was like, how do I crush it with TikTok? And the answer was like, focus on your acquisition in places that you've been nurturing for years and years and years, or something way funnier than what I just said. But but the point was there. And I remember like, I remember in another public music group on Facebook that I was a part of, like I was feeling particularly salty one night about shiny object syndrome. Somebody was like, guys, how do I blow up on TikTok? And I just dropped that meme and immediately got like hate comments, and I'm surprised that I didn't get kicked out of the group, but but yeah, it's like, why are you chasing the white rabbit,
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, totally. So I think that, that's a big initiative for indie founders to be like, look, all of those things might be cool, like we might have like, maybe I am like, I don't like TikTok content, in relation to my music. I'm not really into it, and I've got a lot of other things that I want to do. So, I'm like, TikTok, who cares? But I understand why some people don't feel that way. They see the TikTok growth that's happening, but at the same time, like, do you have the other important things happening? Do you have people joining your mailing list? Do you have people buying your music or buying merchandise from you? And if that's not happening, don't worry about TikTok, because it might make you meme famous, but what's going to happen after that, So I think that's kind of what we're trying to do with founders. Be like, look, I know it seems like you need to jump on these shiny objects, but if you have a solid foundation, you're building your house on stone and not on sand. And that I think is really the goal.
That's so good to have that kind of like mentoring and coaching, to be like, hey, if there's one thing I could warn you of, it's like, beware of gold rushes. I think that's so helpful.
Especially because like with all of the influence like, I feel sometimes I'm a conspiracy theorist and I'm like, okay, so these labels own Spotify, right? And Spotify has its own advertising. And then there's like TikTok and like, where do these partnerships line up? And then, the industry is saying like, oh, you need to be doing this to blow up on Spotify or blow up on TikTok or blow up on Instagram or blow up wherever, which I don't know why, blowing up is it's not actually a positive thing. Like, I don't know why blowing up has a connotation of a positive thing, but blowing up is disintegrating into pieces with a very large explosion. So anyway, I think that there are constructs of these various partnerships, of these various businesses that are like, look, if we get everybody who isn't on this label on this train, then when we do it, we can buy our way to the top of it and claim it as a success,
Yeah.
Or we want this to work for our artists. So, we'll have a couple people do it. And then once everybody jumps on the train, then when our artists do it, it's already effective because everyone's trying to do it, So I just, I think that's my biggest kind of takeaway from things that are trendy. Is that I just don't trust it long term.
The interesting thing to my mind is like whether that's like actually like, a conspiracy that's happening, it's conscious, or whether it's something that's just naturally happening by how these platforms are talked about. There's a very real chance that exists, conscious or not. So if Corrin and I disappear after recording this episode, you know what they did to us.
Then you'll know it was a conspiracy.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think it's just, it's misdirection, I don't know. I probably just sound like an old grumpy person, but I just, to me, it's just it's very frustrating to see people with real great potential, and again, so this is, we bringing it back, right? Because I know I talk in huge hula hoop circles, but this is kind of getting people back to the foundation and being like, don't spread yourself too thin trying to be everything. Instead, get really good at these things. And then once those are working and are mostly automated and are not requiring a ton of your real-time energy, then add these shiny things,
Yeah.
Put the Christmas tree up before you put up the glitter.
Totally. Yeah. And I think it's so great to have, in Founder, that opportunity for people to have the personalized kind of touch in a group coaching setting. It's really like the best of both worlds.
I sure think so.
Yeah. Here I am I'm just raising up IndieFounder here. I really do think it's the best of both worlds though, to be able to have, that personalized push, but also have it happening in a creative think tank where you're able to get insights from everybody else, not to compare yourself to them, but rather to learn and to be inspired. So I think that's really, really awesome.
Yeah, me too. I think it makes everybody a more diverse thinker. You know, they can get inspo from each other and, get taken into a direction that maybe they never considered that ends up working for them,
Yeah, for sure.
So yeah, I really enjoy the dynamic between the students in our sessions for sure.
I know the team is in the process of creating and rolling out some other things with Founder. What does that look like? Let's talk unveiling a little bit.
Okay. Don't have to twist my arm about that. So IndieFounder's been going really well. I mean, I think one thing that we're dealing with is that, especially indies who are relatively new, as much as they may have loved going through the buddy system training, which I know all of them did right away first before anything else. There's a disconnect in the way that we name them, right? We've been naming them after the buddy system stages, but some people are like, okay, so what is that? Even though they know what that stage is, or know kind of what's supposed to be happening psychologically in that doesn't necessarily mean that they know the tech that they're doing, the strategies they're implementing, so we are going through a renaming convention, which is going to be really fun. And I'm not going to unveil what those are yet, but they're going to be getting fresh new names, which
Exciting.
is just a very minor thing, but I like it. So I'm excited about it, and I'm going to share that. We also have more splinters planned. So something that we hear all the time from indies is how much they struggle. First off is the understanding between introduction and education, and then that whole nurturing thing, right?
Ooh, nurturing.
Yeah. And so education and nurturing can actually go really well hand in hand because they're really doing the same thing. It's just a different point in the conversation. So, for example, if you say you go on a blind date, right? And your date says, I'm this person and, blah, blah, blah. And what each other looks like now. And you sit down and you're going to have dinner. I fortunately have never been on a blind date. I'm sure it's horrific for those of you who had, but this is just the best example that came to my head. So hopefully no PTSD triggers here. So you sit down at dinner and then you proceed to have a conversation and learn about each other. So that is an education process. That's education in a real-time relationship. And that is what you're trying to get from these new potential fans. They know who you are. They've been exposed to who you are, but maybe they don't really know that much about you other than they saw this video view campaign that you were running, like if you were running a fan finder. So now it's like, okay, how do I get them to give a crap beyond this one song? Because as amazing as your music may be, it's just never going to be enough. They need to know who you are as an artist, as a person, or your brand, however you present yourself. So that's the education process. Now, nurturing is very similar. The nurturing would be more like, okay, you went on that date and now you're on the 6th date, right? And you like each other, you got that far, and you continue to divulge things about yourself, and maybe you have a very serious conversation and you talk about something from your childhood or, something like that, where it's a little bit deeper and it's more meaningful, but it's still that person getting to know you. So this is the same thing, right? How do you let people in, in steps, essentially?
Yeah. So
I think a lot of indies feel really intimidated by the combination of those two, and they overlap a lot. So that's the next splinter that we have planned, is one centered around education.
Cool.
Basically figuring out how to educate people about who you are after they've just had a single touch from you. And then at that point, say you get them through and you get their email, or maybe you don't get their email, but they still need to see more from you. And that's where green light warmth boosting comes into play. And you can, which we've talked about before, you can run very low spend ads to get people to keep seeing your face. That can contribute to the education process. And then nurturing largely happens through email, though it can happen now through live streams, through, consistent posting, although posts don't tend to really nurture that much because there's not a lot of depth to them outside of a live stream. But we're going to be strategizing that and coming up with ways for people to not go too cray when you don't talk about a childhood trauma on the first date,
Yeah.
That's something you might get into later.
Just me?
Yeah, apparently. Well, you got a lovely lady, so no judgment, but whatever works for you, but that's not the majority. So figuring out how to, get these conversations deeper and deeper, how to automate that in a way that doesn't feel automated, and continue to just keep people in your web, right? Because if they don't turn into a purchaser right away, they hopefully will eventually, but they definitely won't if you just let them leave the circle,
Yeah.
We're going to be getting real in depth on that. And to be honest, Jesse actually headed up the curriculum on this one, which I think is just brilliant. Jesse was actually one of the original old school founders, the OG program, as we say. And he has been around Indiepreneur as long as I have. He's been in since inception, not as an employee, but as a student. And he's really dug in, he loves this stuff, which is, one reason why he and I we both love founders so much. So he's actually built out a lot of the education, and in his own artistry, he's been executing these strategies for years. and has really found, through that and through teching for IndieX and then working with a lot of founders, he's just found this great way to be like, okay. And he came up with this like master plan for the education splinter and showed it to me. And I was like, yeah, this is great. Because all the other curriculum have been, I'm the one fronting up that, but this is Jesse's first initial development, and it is completely endorsed by Corrin because it's gonna be wild. I'm really excited to see what happens with it. So I think we're launching that. It may be launched as of the publication of this podcast, which would be super exciting.
Sweet.
But that's a very exciting splinter that we have planned, or that is launching. So that's one unveil. I won't get too deep into it, but we also have 2 splinters planned. One of them I'm going to keep a secret for a moment, but the other is a merch-focused splinter, which I am geeking over. I'm super excited about it. If you guys have listened to this podcast much, you know I love 2 things: IndieFounder and merchandise.
IndieFounder and money.
Yeah, exactly. The money. I am interested in keeping indies consistently employed, okay? But that is what it's about, So we're going to get into the gritty of merch development. And, I'm not a huge fan of on-demand, right? But we're still going to talk about that because sometimes it makes sense. So talking about on-demand merch, talking about margins, talking about different vendors, ideation for cool, inexpensive things to do for your fans. An example that I can pull out of my head right now is actually my own, which is not to brag, but I have a very military I guess, what would you call that? They respect military. They like military.
Big fan of the military.
Big fan of the military. So anyway, I didn't want to say militant, like militant didn't make sense. But anyway,
I have a militant fan base.
Yes, I have a very supportive audience. They are supportive of the military among many things, very America, and something that they like is wearing dog tags that are fashioned after, standard dog tags, but then maybe they are, coated or engraved or something like that. So I purchased some laser etched dog tags that had just my logo and my name on it. And they were like 71. I got 100 of them and they were 71 cents a piece. So cheap. And then I figured out, I was like, because we have the Glowforge for Full Stack Merch, which is a laser printer, I was able to actually metal mark them on the back. So I said, all right, you guys can get just the regular dog tag for $12, which is a crazy margin. And people did buy it there. Or you can get a personalized version where in my writing on the back of the dog tag, I will, put your first name laser marked so that it's permanent. It doesn't like wipe off like if I used a Sharpie or something. And I made a font out of my handwriting and popped them in the Glowforge and marked them and set those at $20. So essentially, it was very on brand. My fans were totally into it. And the margin on it is redonkulous, like better than a CD even.
Yeah, that's a stupid margin. So good.
Yeah, it's a ridiculous margin. So even if you calculate the Glowforge depreciation and then the aerosol spray that I have to put on the dog tags to mark them, it still is at like 80 cents, So, it's interesting when you get into a brand, how much you can get really creative with this stuff and maximize your margins. Because if you have only a small customer list, that stuff will make or break you. Being able to ideate inexpensive merch that is highly valued by your audience because of any niche interests that may, coincide with your brand. So I'm excited about the merch one for sure. It's obviously my first or second favorite subject. And it's really fun. I actually, when Jesse was doing his pre-order for his last release, or his upcoming release, actually, I think it's coming out very soon. We were talking about all kinds of merch designs, like t-shirt designs, as well as, the little cubes, which I've talked about on here before that we traded with the Glowforge. And I had so much fun ideating with someone else about their brand. So I'm excited for there to be 10 people that I get to like mess with all their stuff.
Yeah,
be like, oh, you should try this, and we'll probably actually end up prototyping some things for indies that go through that session as well. Because Full Stack Merch is, we're very close to being at a point where we can produce short runs of very customized products for indies, so they don't have to go to some vendor and buy 500 of them, right? This is stuff that we can help indies create and design and have it be completely unique to their artistry. So it's all going to wrap in very, it's just simpatico, and I'm very excited about it.
That's going to be a gret session. I'm so excited to get the day-to-day deets on it.
It's going to be, I won't shut up about it.
Yeah.
So yeah, you'll totally hear all about it, guaranteed.
Yeah, I can't wait. I think it's going to be great. So that's a really exciting development. What else is on the horizon?
Are we late enough in the episode yet for me to talk about it? Oh, we are, because we're in the last 10 minutes, folks.
I think we are.
Okay, so I don't want to get into all of the things just yet, but earlier this week we had our Black Friday sale planning meeting, all the words, and we were talking about cool things that we wanted to do for Black Friday, because I think, there's a point where you guys think we're always going to do the same thing for Black Friday, and we're not. We're going to do cool things for this Black Friday, and I'm super stoked on it. The whole team has brought brilliant ideas together, which, as a side note, as the merch person, if you haven't started planning your Black Friday, you should start doing that. And Jack and I might touch on that as we get closer. But in the meantime, what we decided was I've been developing out foundations, advanced,
Ooh.
Put an arena echo in there. But, and I am so excited about it. So we're actually going to be doing the very first class is going to align with Black Friday, and you'll find out how later. But we're going to be going into deep stuff, right? So we're going to touch on Google ads and advanced e-com tracking, and getting into your catalog and making those get really advanced in Facebook ad retargeting. We're going to be getting into a lot of in-depth stuff, mostly in advertising, but also in your audiences, in your automations. It's mostly going to be, I would say it's mostly tech. It's less ideation than some of the other splinters, but it's the stuff that's, I think, just what's going to provide revenue lift and really get people, to have a great comprehension of how to use all of these different tools, Google Analytics, the Facebook Pixel, both ad platforms, using more advanced structure in your automation, whether that is in messaging, whether that's in email, whether that's in SMS, whether it's in your store, right? Depending on your store platform, just bringing things up to the next level. It's going to be application based. We are definitely not just going to take anybody into this, because we want to make sure that everyone is like ready for this, because I am laying in hard on it. So I'm very excited about that. We're going to be launching applications for that sooner than Black Friday, so that people can kind of check it out. And then the goal is, after that Black Friday session launches, and when we get into 2021, every founder session will be application basis. And depending on where you are in these different things, you'll be routed to the best session for you. And that's really because with Founder, it's like I was saying, we've got beginner indies, we've got advanced indies, and it is cool for them to interface off of each other. But I also want to give indies the opportunity to really dig in, right? If they want to be a nerd like me, get on the nerd train. We gonna go. So I'm super stoked on that. And it's actually going to be more advanced than I've seen any of the founders come into IndieFounder. So I'm digging it. So that is going to be super exciting. And I just can't wait for that to launch because I get to really dig in on just the tech development and the stuff that some people may not love, but the people who are in this session with me, they'll love it. By the end, at least. And the really cool thing about it is that at the end of the session, depending on how successful you execute these things in the session, there's going to be kind of a post-session extension where if you have met all of these, certain requirements by the end of the session, we're going to run campaign. I'm basically going to stand by you and we're going to run these campaigns. You're going to have a campaign planned. You'll come out of that session with a campaign ready to go. And we're going to do some crazy testing on some of your stuff.
Ooh, that's so exciting.
Yeah. And it'll be some, there's going to be some experiments going on in there. But there's strategies that I feel will be advantageous to these indies. So, and basically they'll have consulting access to me to help them pivot those ads or see what's going on with them. So it's definitely going to be way more in depth than anything we've done. But I just felt like we do have listeners and indies who are, ready to step it up a notch. I don't want to continue to assume that everyone's a beginner, which I don't assume everyone's a beginner, but I do assume that maybe going too heavy into it is too much. And I don't want to keep thinking that. I want to enable the people who really want to get into the grime, and I'm here for it. So that's my big announcement. I'm really excited about it. Hopefully other people are excited with me. But we're definitely, if you're not on our mailing list, I suggest getting on it because I will be announcing this via email. That's where the initial announcement for applications will be. So if you're thinking, dang, I want in on that, just make sure you're on our mailing list because you'll have first knowledge of the fact that applications are now available.
Yeah, it's so exciting. I'm certainly excited about it. I think, not that we have a crystal ball, but I think all of these changes are going to be such a huge impact for what the future of IndieFounder looks like. And I personally can't wait to see how it all unfolds. It's so exciting. If someone's interested in any of the IndieFounder splinters that we've talked about today, and they're trying to figure out is this a good fit for me? What's the best way for them to get started and thinking about that?
Yeah, so there's really two ways. I mean, IndieBot is our mini chat bot, and it houses all of the brilliance from my brain. I'm not brilliant. The bot's brilliant, but I dumped all of my brain into it so it could, tell people about every last thing that they possibly could want to know about Founder. So the best way to activate that is to go to indiepreneur.io/services. And on that page, you will see many services that we have available, but all the Founder sessions will be listed there. And there's our Spotify playlist submissions are also on that page, if you didn't know. But yeah, that is where you'd want to check it out on our website, or if you just message our page, IndieBot will serve you a main menu. And from there, you can go to agency/coaching services, and it'll take you right through to figure out if IndieFounder is a good fit. I'm just excited to see who comes through because every single founder who has been in a session and stuck with it and really committed to it has produced great results for themselves. And I'm glad that they have started to feel enabled to take control of their own stuff. Like, you don't have to listen to us anymore. Like, you've got the comprehension to just go kick ass, and it's not relying on anyone but you. And that's what I want to see this community be doing for themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been mind-numbingly cool to watch what IndieFounder has done and how it's empowered people, and how it's informed so much of just even day-to-day discussions with our team, and
because I won't shut up about it. If you guys are like, wow, you guys have talked a lot about Founder this year. Don't worry, the staff is way more exposed to it than you guys are. I'm just passionate. What can I say?
It's exciting stuff for sure. I think it's cool. You know, something that Corrin and I talk about all the time is it's cool how Founder has impacted IndieX, has impacted Indie Pro, and how the whole ecosystem is really like informing itself and acting as a feedback loop. So, you know, I think, you know, for any of our indies to be a part of that is beneficial, because it's all kind of feeding into, you know, the different things that we do at Indepreneur. So the more people that can get in on the fun, the better.
It's just like a by indies for indies kind of opportunity, you know, where it's like we create these things, but really the indies are creating them, because the indies are like, I want this, I need this, you know, and we're like, okay, yeah, we should make that. You know,
sounds cheesy, but we literally couldn't do it without you. you know?
Yeah. The community really is what informs us as to what's needed next, you know, and even though we might not be able to get every little thing, you know, executed as quickly as we'd like, because we're such a small team. We have a whole ideation board that's full of things that have come from indies, and, you know, Gracie, our community specialist, is just amazing at, you know, sending out surveys and collecting as much information from indies as possible. And these are the things that indies asked for. So here you go.
Yeah, it's super, super cool. It was great hearing and just kind of getting the inside scoop from you, Corrin, on
thanks for letting me talk about Founder for an hour.
Yeah, for sure. This was a blast. I was super pumped to get to grill you on it a little bit.
Yeah, it was fun for me too. So thanks again so much for letting me just blabber on, and thank you guys for listening to me blabber on. Hopefully you found some things in this, you know, I want you to get excited about what you're doing, you know. That's kind of the whole, if you don't have that kind of momentum within yourself, it's difficult to do the hard things, you know. So next week, if you're looking for more motivation, Jesse and Ed are going to be joining Jack. I'm going to take a week off, but the guys are going to join Jack, which, I mean, you're seeing at that point the three powerhouses of IndieX, who are running all of these agency accounts, doing all the things on all of these different artists' work. And Ed and Jesse are also both releasing albums this year and running pre-orders. Yeah. So we're going to be able to get some insights from them on, you know, what they're doing in IndieX and how that's educated what they're doing for their own releases, and a little bit of update on how the releases are going. You know, we stand, you know, proud that a lot of our indies or a lot of our staff are doing the same things we're asking indies to do, and working for IndieX, you know?
Yeah.
So I'm really excited to see, you know, what the guys have to say about that. I know, Jack, you're going to be running the ship on that one. Are you ready to grill them?
We've got a really, really cool episode planned. I was talking with the guys about it in our IndieX team meeting today, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun, and they're going to unveil a whole bunch of really cool stuff. So I can't wait. It's going to be a blast.
Sounds like major release inspo. So if you're getting ready to release, be sure to check out that episode. And we'll see you, Jack will see you next week, and I will see you in 2 weeks on Creative Juice. Have a great day, indies.